In this module, we'll look at the life course as a social construct. As a basic social institution, the life course has a maternal force. It may either impose external constraints on individual action or shape the expectations we have about the proper progression of events and roles during our own life course, and ultimately the way in which we experience ourselves and our relations with others.
We'll look at some features and propositions about age structuring, 3 in particular. First, we'll look at how age structuring is influenced by history and culture. Then we'll look at age structures like other social structures such as gender and class become embedded in the psychology of individuals. And then thirdly, I will look at how socially constructed age categories change over time, as do the patterns of individual lives. First, we focus on the life course in history and culture. You see that different cultures in historical periods have different conceptions of the stages of life and their boundaries, dimensions, and divisions. In 1993, Archer contrasted the Western and Oriental views of adulthood. He found that, in the Western view, we see adulthood as an achieved state, accomplished absolutely when childhood is left behind. General social attitude is that adulthood is a singular and stable endpoint of development. In contrast, the Oriental view holds that adulthood is a process whereby the individual can become more and more of an adult, but there is no guarantee that aging automatically brings with it maturity. And in Confucian tradition, believes that there is a magical connection between the ruler, the country as a whole, and its people because all things share a common nature. Human development is seen as an unfolding of this nature, principally through diminishing the selfishness that separates us from others. Once we truly know our own nature, there is no difference between personal desire and what is morally correct. We learn to discover our own nature, and this is a lifelong endeavor. Next, we'll look at parallels between the social construct of age and gender. The state intervention and regulation have served to maintain distinctions about gender and age category. The state legalizes, standardizes, and provides institutional support for entry into and exit from formal education, employment, marriage, and even life itself. This institutionalization of age and the cooperation of society at large makes it highly unlikely that individuals can chart alternative life courses. In order to function effectively as members of late 20th century Western society, we need to identify correctly the gender and age categories to which others belong, and to assist others in identifying us as well, because our interactions with others are partly based upon presumptions about gender and age. As with gender, one develops a posture and attitude toward oneself as belonging to an age category. That is, the adoption of psychological characteristics deemed to be appropriate for a given age, to satisfy general social expectations that at least partially govern relations among age categories. Now we'll look at some implications of adulthood as a social construct. Adult educators who seek to make their work of individual change and transformation fit into a wider agenda of social change need to acknowledge the social and historical dimension of adult development. This perception will help them distinguish learning experiences and personal changes that genuinely transform and liberate their students from those that simply key into the social expectations associated with the different phases of life. Age categories are seen as the natural result of psychological and biological factors associated with chronological age. Understanding the processes and structures underlying the emergence and maintenance of age category identity, that is how we come to constitute ourselves as belonging to a particular age category. Social phenomena are not transmitted genetically, they're transmitted socially and symbolically, and they are historical givens. By interacting with others and reacting to or participating in social institutions, we come to constitute ourselves as social beings.
As we continue our discussion here of the implications of adulthood as a social construct, the life course as a product of history and culture is socially constructed, and therefore individual development should be considered both a social and a personal experience. And along with this, we see transformations occurring. For example, consider Aaron and Krupp's observation from a 1990 study that in the first half of life, men are generally more assertive than women, and women are more nurturing than men, while in the second half of life, men become more nurturing and women become more assertive. Point well documented in the literature. There's studies from Hyde and Phillips from 1979 and Gutmann from 1987. Adult educators could respond to this developmental trend toward reversing assertiveness roles by introducing appropriate courses, methodologies, and materials to enhance and support it. Learners might be encouraged to reflect on their beliefs, attitudes, and emotional reactions, or they might even practice the skills associated with assertiveness and nurturing as appropriate. However, if confined in this way, the role of the adult educator would simply be adaptive, a support to a socially produced phase of stage of the life course. However, adult educators could go further and encourage critical reflection on the social and historical origin of things, for example, like gender differences and the internalized premises on which this difference is based. And the life cycle change would then be located within the larger context of how gender identity is formed and whose interests it serves. As we wrap up this session, in conclusion, let's review a little bit some of the features and propositions about age structuring and how it relates to the life course of individuals. Remember, we saw how age structuring is influenced by history and culture. Then how age structures, like other social structures such as gender and class, become embedded in the psychology of individuals. We saw there that how, for example, the physiological and biological factors associated with aging are not sufficient to support existing conceptions of age-appropriate behavior. There's also little difference, except for the very old and the very young, for a direct connection between chronological age and the constraints imposed by our conception of age-appropriate behavior. And therefore, individual development should be considered both a social and personal phenomenon, as an area showing how that this life course is constructed and these age categories change over time, along with the patterns of the individual life. As we wrap this up, I hope you enjoyed this session and look forward to seeing you in the next module.